So many people have asked, how did I actually start my daycare, that I thought it was high time I finally sit down and film a video. Now this is going to be a lot of information, a lot of talking, a lot of tips along the way, but if you are interested in starting a daycare, it's definitely worth watching. We don't just film daycare videos on our channel, we also film a lot of two-parent working family, working mom related videos, organizing, decluttering, and how to reach your goals kind of videos. So make sure you hit the subscribe button if you want more content, but every Friday we usually do a daycare related video. So the reason I've avoided making this video for quite a while is because every area has so many different rules and regulations, whether you have to be licensed or unlicensed or how it all works. I'm personally from Minnesota in the United States, but I know we have viewers all over the world, and so I'm just going to share what I did. There's a lot of tips that are just general tips and things that you're going to want to do when you start a daycare. So I'm just going to share what I did, and hopefully you can get some information and inspiration along the way. So the very first thing I did when I was actually considering opening up a preschool, but it had the same regulations as a daycare where I live. And I was planning to do like 2 preschool classes a day, but that ended up not being what I wanted to do when it all came time to open. So I ended up doing full day, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. daycare. But either way, I had to look into the regulations for my area. For my area, we have to go to 2 different orientations where they go over everything for your area. And another thing I looked into were trainings. For Minnesota, we have to take 16 hours of training every year. And when you first start, I can't remember if that's actually higher because you do have to do like a 5 or 6 hour supervising for safety course that you only have to do one time, and then you just do a 2-hour one every year after that, I think. But there are a lot of different regulations for what types of classes, how many hours, how many of each, how often. Some classes you only have to take every other year, some you have to take every year. So like, and sometimes you don't have to take it at all, or it's every 5 years. It just depends on the class, and actually Minnesota has changed that even since I opened a few years ago. So there's different rules and regulations. But I'd highly encourage you, if you're wanting to start, don't email me saying, what do I do? Instead, Google is your best friend. Like, go to the county office or something of that nature, depending on where you live, and ask, what do we have to do to open a daycare? Or find a friend, find somebody who does daycare in your area and ask them, where do I go for information? A lot of times there's like a child care resource and referral in your area that you can reach out to and say, where do I begin? You know, there may not be an actual page that says how to start a daycare online, but hopefully you can find somebody who can answer that question for you, because you're not the only one who's ever done this in your area, most likely. And so there's got to be some resource out there to tell you how to begin. So after I figured out, what I had to do, I started going to the 2 orientations, and then I started on my trainings. I wanted to make sure I got those out of the way right away and then work on the house stuff later. When I personally started, I was pregnant when I started this journey, and I didn't open my daycare till my daughter was 10 months old. So I started the process in like fall of 2014, and I didn't open my daycare until January 2016. That was due to a lot of hesitancy. A lot happened. We bought a house. We had to change things in the house and stuff like that. So it definitely doesn't have to take that long for you, but it really just depends on what's required of you, how much time you have. If you're working outside the home and have kids and are trying to do this, it may take longer, just trying to fit it into your schedule, but it's definitely doable in a couple months in most cases. So I personally had to take 16 hours, I believe, or it may have been a little more. I did that supervising for safety course that was like 5 or 6 hours long. I did a THURS, sudden unexpected infant death syndrome course, and an abusive head trauma course. They go together, and that's something that's required every year. Either you have to watch videos or you have to do it in person or online. That's for Minnesota. Keep in mind it may be different where you're from. I also took a car seat transportation course. I've never had to use it, but I just wanted to make sure I was certified, and it was a great class to take before having a baby, to know how to install a car seat the right way, so I, was safer as a mom. I had to take some kind of health and safety class, and then CPR and first aid for children, and that's something we still have to take every other year. Then when I got into the swing of understanding the rules and things, I took my orientations, did some of my trainings. I reached out to the licensors in my area because I wanted to be licensed in Minnesota. If you have more than one unrelated family, you have to be licensed. That's the law. So I wanted more than one unrelated family. I don't have family around here to watch their children, so I definitely needed the income from more than one family. So I reached out to the licensing department and asked specific questions. We have a creek running through our backyard, kind of, and so I wanted to know, do I have to have a fence? What are the rules about the fence? Because I wanted to make sure if I'm going to be pouring a lot of money into a fence that I'm doing it the right way. And they actually came out and looked at it and gave me some information. And that was really, really helpful. So if you can have a licensor come out and just kind of give you pointers about your specific home, I would highly recommend that, because, you know, what you see from your eyes as somebody who's never done this before is way different than a licensor's viewpoint who does this every day. They're inspecting homes every day. They know the rules backwards and forwards, and it's just really helpful to get their input, because they may give you some tips of cost-saving ideas depending on what's allowed and what's not. So I'd highly recommend that. So we did have to put in a complete fence in our backyard with a gate, and then we also had to fence along our driveway that has the creek there too, so that kids aren't like falling in. And then it's also good to ask them if there are any programs for grant money of some kind to help new daycares. A lot of places are struggling with a childcare shortage, so often there are resources you can use if you're starting out to get some funding. I personally didn't receive any funding, but I did get a grant a year later. So it's just something to look into if you need it, if you want it. It's always nice to start off without having to pay a ton of money up front. And then once I was, going along the process, figuring everything out, I also reached out to some other providers. I found some through some Facebook groups, and then I knew of one through our church and through our neighborhood. And so I reached out to them, and they actually let me come into their space during daycare and ask questions and see how their setup is, see how it kind of works. And it was just a really, really great thing, because, dreaming of daycare is way different than what actual daycare is like. And it was just so helpful to go and see, oh, you did that. Why did you do that? Maybe I'll do that. And I got so many ideas from them. It just really was great to have a resource to go to, and then I could ask them further questions along the way. A lot of providers are wanting friends, are wanting to help other providers. It doesn't feel like competition, so don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and ask if you could, email them some questions, call them, or stop by. Most of them would be really happy to do that. And it doesn't hurt to have some friends when you begin. Okay, so once all that stuff was kind of taken care of, it was time to get our house ready. Now this part can take a very long time or no time at all, depending on your situation, depending on what the rules are, depending on what you want, and so on and so forth. For us, we actually went through and changed all our outlets to tamper-resistant outlets. We live in a 70s house, and we wanted to update those anyway because they were all cream-colored outlets and light switches, and I wanted white. So we just decided, instead of having the tamper-proof plugs that you plug in for baby-proofing, we just wanted to upgrade them all to the tamper-resistant ones so we don't have to have any covers. So that's something we did. And then in this daycare space, we actually did a lot to the ceiling. We painted it white. We painted the trim, some of the trim white. We had to, go through and baby-proof this fireplace. We put up the shelving. We bolted it into the fireplace itself, into the brick, so it wouldn't fall over because we didn't want kids climbing in there. And then we made these surrounds just with some chipboard and foam and batting and fabric. We just stapled and glued it on, and it has lasted a really long time so far and has been really great. We also had to do things like adding smoke detectors, getting a carbon monoxide detector, fire extinguisher, and then buying tons of gates because we have a 4-level home. We've got 3 little staircases, so we have to have tons of gates. Putting the fences in that we needed. We wanted to make sure we did that to get licensed. And I also installed locks on the top of some of our doors just for added peace of mind on our pantry and an office closet and our front and back doors. And also we used to have a door going down to the basement, so we put a lock on that, which was required for licensing, so kids weren't opening it up and falling down the stairs. And during that time, our basement also flooded, so we were working on a complete remodel down there as well. So we had a lot of extra work that most people wouldn't have. But it's something, to consider, things you may need to do and things you may just want to do before you open. We painted the whole ceiling white, which was a big project. It's not something we had to do, but I knew if I was going to be spending a lot of time in this room, I didn't want these big dark beams staring at me, and I knew it wasn't a project I would want to do once I was working full-time and exhausted. So that's another thing. I was nannying full-time during this time, but I was at home, so I could kind of do some of these projects here and there between naps and things like that. So it wasn't as hard as once the daycare was in full swing. And then other things like blackout curtains, just those little things that kind of add up to a lot of time and a lot of money and just a lot of work overall once you add it all up. I would say some things definitely wait on, see if it'll work later on, see if you really want it, but some things, you have to do for the rules or you want to do for safety reasons, just for peace of mind. So during this process, I was also collecting used, inexpensive books, toys, craft supplies, stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend holding off as much as you can and just doing the bare minimum when it comes to these things, because kids can play with very little, and it's much better to see what works, see what people like, and invest in nicer stuff once you're really in the thick of things. Because pretty much everything I bought before starting my daycare, I have since gotten rid of. I decided I didn't like it. They broke. I just changed my mind on a lot of things. So I'm glad I didn't go out and buy all this brand new stuff only to decide later on that I didn't like it. Books are always great from garage sales and stuff like that. You can get them very inexpensively. I would also recommend just some kind of block set. So if it's magnet tiles or just wooden blocks or waffle blocks, some kind of blocks or the cardboard blocks, because kids can play with those in so many different ways. And then some kind of dollhouse of some sort, if it's a Little People dollhouse, a Melissa and Doug dollhouse, or just like the dollhouse from your childhood that you can pull out once in a while. And then I think it really is essential to have a play kitchen and some play food. But you can get all of this stuff used. Garage sales, now is the time to start looking. And thrift stores, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, side of the road. Just don't spend a lot on these things because you probably are going to change your mind, or maybe the kids aren't even going to like them. You just never know. I also decided to buy an affordable curriculum. So I ended up going with TUES, which I still think is a really great curriculum. I don't use it now for time reasons, but when I first started, it was great to start off saying I use a curriculum and to not have to pay a lot of money before I'm making any income really with families, because I slowly added in families over time. And so TUES is great because it's online. It tells you what to use, but it's very inexpensive. And now I use Funshine Express. I love because it all just comes to me. It saves a lot of time, but it is definitely more expensive. So I would not start off with a really great curriculum, especially if you only have a couple kids enrolled. You just never know. I would start off slow, and you can always change as you go. I also got enrolled in the food program then. I think it's great to at least start on the food program. It gets you really used to cooking well-balanced meals. It's nice to have guidelines and to know what is a normal serving size for kids, and it's going to bring you in some extra income, which is great when you first start. I'm not on it anymore. I may get on it in the future. I don't really know, but I have a whole video on the pros and cons I will leave below. Another thing I did before I actually opened, a couple weeks before, I started practicing all of the licensing rules and the schedule. And I think this is really important, especially if you have other people in your house, if you're not just a single person doing this on your own. If you have a spouse, if you have kids, it's really important to get them used to it before you start, because you're going to be stressed out, especially because there's rules, and so your family's probably not used to following those rules, so it's good to start it before you actually open. So for me, this was like making sure knives were put away, bobby pins weren't left out, little pieces weren't left out. They seem pretty self-explanatory, but you don't always think of those things when you're just living in your house, because maybe you have older kids, or maybe your little one isn't old enough to get into that stuff, so you haven't really thought about it. I would just start practicing all those rules and then start the schedule a little bit early, especially if you have kids. So it's nice to, wake up at the same time you will during daycare, get your child waking up or children waking up at that time, having lunch or snack at the same time, breakfast, and then kind of going through when dinner will be after. So that way, at least, if anything, you're at least on the same schedule when you start, even though it may be a huge adjustment for your family. At least you will have the schedule down before you open. And then when it was about time to advertise, so I opened January 4th, 2016, and I started advertising, I believe, in October or November, so that I'd have a couple kids ready to go when I opened. But I made a website in July or August, I want to say. So I personally use Wix.com, not affiliated with them, but I just really loved how easy it was. I do pay for my own domain name, and I think it's really important to start off being really professional. I have a whole video on that as well with other ideas of how to be professional right from the start. And I think this really helped me overall to have a really nice looking website. So even though I was brand new, I had authority in the eyes of the parents, and that was really crucial for my rates, for getting families, and just starting off that relationship here instead of like, oh, you're brand new, we'll try you out, but you're probably not very good. No, I was already seen as somebody that people want to enroll with. So that was a really great way to start as well. So I'd highly recommend having a website that parents can go to look into more information about your program. And so I started advertising, like I said, in October or November, and started doing interviews. I had a lot of interviews at that time, and I went with the families that overall felt the best, that the ages worked, and it worked out that I only started with 2 kids, then I added another a couple weeks later, then another a week after that, and a couple, like 1 or 2 more a couple weeks after that. It was nice to space it out instead of like wham bam, here's 10 kids, you know, when I wasn't used to watching that many. It was nice to kind of start off slowly, especially because I started in the winter, so we were stuck indoors a lot. So I'd recommend that if you can financially, just kind of stagger the families a couple weeks if you're able to, because it just helps you really ease into it instead of getting overwhelmed right away. So just to really drive this home and give you guys as much value as possible, here are some other extra tips that I would give to somebody looking to start a daycare or in the process of starting a daycare. I charged an enrollment fee when I first opened. I don't charge as high of one anymore, but because I had so many people interviewing and wanting spots, because there were a lot of daycares closing at that time, so I really had a good advantage there, I could get away with charging an enrollment fee. And what I did, and what I told the families I did with this money, is I reinvested it back into my program. They knew I was new. They knew I didn't, have a ton of brand new stuff, and I wanted to buy things like lockers and tables and chairs and bins and things like that and new toys. So I took the money parents gave when they enrolled for the enrollment fee, that was the non-refundable enrollment fee, to hold their spot. I reinvested that into my program. So this is a really great idea to help you get some funds when you first start that you can kind of hold on to till you know what you actually want to buy with it. And parents, I think, really liked that it was going back into the program. Like I already mentioned, but I want to drive it home, don't buy too much to start with. You can always buy it later when funds are, more robust in your family, once you've been going for a while, and once you really know what works, because I'm constantly changing my mind on things. I like to switch things up, and so I'm so grateful I didn't go out and buy a ton of brand new stuff right away, because I probably would have changed my mind. Be really professional from the start. I don't want to say fake it till you make it. I don't want you to lie, but be more confident than you probably actually are. This is a whole new world. You're probably kind of like, oh my gosh, is this going to work out? What's it actually like? Will I have trouble with families? But just be confident, because you will have a lot fewer issues with parents if you're confident. Because if you're not confident, they're going to feed off of that and look for things to have a problem with. If you're confident, and upfront, less likely they are to take advantage of you, and the better off you are to really mesh well with the good families. And then, like I said, ease into it. Ease into it financially, ease into it with buying things, ease into it with how many kids you're going to take on at a time, ease into it with working on your home beforehand. Like, I know definitely finances and stuff matter, and we can't always wait forever to open, but if you can ease into it a little bit, I think you'll be better off in the long run. You don't want to burn out. So that is how I started my daycare. I would love if you guys would share how you started, if you already have a daycare, or leave any questions you have to this video. Maybe I'll film a follow-up video answering your questions, and you can do that on our community tab. YouTube has disabled all comments on our channel because we do feature our children once in a while, and so to protect them from bad comments, YouTube has decided to disable all the comments. So we make a corresponding community tab post with the thumbnail from this video, so you can just head over there and scroll through to find it and leave your comments there, and we will try to respond to you there. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye guys.